Here are the answers to the critical thinking practice for Chapter 11. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole scenario with you. I'm sure you've read through it. It was 3 slides long. So, let's get to the actual questions. So, my nephew, who became ill on day 2, insists to this day that the macaroni and cheese my sister, his aunt, fed him at lunch made him sick. So, let's see what the answer options are. He is correct. The illness was linked to ingested, contaminated macaroni and cheese. Well, this is what he thinks. Let's go ahead and keep that in mind. He is partially correct. The illness was linked to the ingested, contaminated food, but not the macaroni and cheese. He is incorrect. The illness shows an epidemiological progression. Well, what does epidemiological progression mean? What it means is that you've got the first person to become ill, the index case, and then you have people around them at regular intervals, matching the incubation period, becoming sick. And he is partially correct. The illness shows an epidemiological progression, but it is linked to incorrectly stored food. Well, from what actually happened, the correct answer is he is incorrect. The illness shows an epidemiological progression because my brother-in-law was sick the first day, my nephew and my sister were sick 2 days later, approximately, and so on and so forth. So it shows an epidemiological progression. Well, then why does he think that the illness was linked to the macaroni and cheese? Well, it is a fact that the thing that you throw up when you're sick, you think is what caused you sick. This is an evolutionary adaptation, because if you do get food poisoning, you don't want to go back to that same source and get sick again. So, and besides, it's linked to a very unpleasant experience. So oftentimes, the thing which you throw up, you cannot eat again. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. And he was also correct. He ate the macaroni and cheese, he threw it up, and that probably made him sick whenever he thinks about macaroni and cheese. Now let's take a look at this one. Are there illnesses that show an epidemiological progression that is linked to incorrectly stored food or contaminated food? And the answer is yes. But if we were to see that, everybody who ate the macaroni and cheese would be sick, but nobody who ate the macaroni and cheese would be sick. Or everybody who had Thanksgiving dinner would be sick, and nobody else who ate it. That would show an epidemiological progression if everybody who had Thanksgiving dinner got sick. Now on to the next question. What was the likely mode of transmission? Well, this one was probably fairly easy for you. Illnesses involving vomiting, you can either get them through fecal-oral or through contact with a surface that has been exposed to vomit. The answer would be either fecal-oral or contact. Now, it probably wouldn't be respiratory because generally, if you get respiratory diseases through respiratory modes of transmission, that's generally how it goes. And we already decided that it was not vehicle or food, and there are no mosquitoes or flies involved in this situation. The next question is, who was the index or first case for this particular epidemic? Well, this was probably easy for you as well. The brother-in-law from California. He was the first one to show up not feeling well, and then we saw everybody else get sick. Although, answer D was the option that my roommates at college went with when they all got sick. Next, what type of disease is this? So we have acute. That's when you get sick very quickly, you have a rapid onset of signs and symptoms, and a quick resolution. Chronic, generally speaking, the signs and symptoms are not as severe as in acute, and they persist for longer. Latent is where you have signs and symptoms at one point, then you have no signs or symptoms, with the understanding that the signs and symptoms could come back later. Epidemic would be a spike above what is normal in that area for that disease. Fatal, well, of course that means you die from it. And then subacute is between acute and chronic. So usually it doesn't last as long as chronic, but it's not as bad as acute. From the description of the disease, we all got sick suddenly, we were very sick, and then we're better within about a day or two. So that puts it in the acute area. Now, a case could be made for it being epidemic because it was a spike, at least in my family. But was it epidemic for the whole area? I don't know. And since we don't track epidemics on the scale of families, epidemic wouldn't really apply. So what was the incubation time? Well, from the information, the incubation time was 2 days. After I went home, I was counting off the hours, and sure enough, 2 days after I'd been exposed, I got ill. And I have to say, never before or since have I seen a disease progress exactly every 2 days. Actually, other than being sick, it was really quite interesting from an epidemiological point of view. From a patient point of view, that was one of the more miserable cases of gastrointestinal distress I've ever had. Well, that's it for this set of critical thinking questions. Hopefully you enjoyed it as we get into subject material that you're probably finding much more interesting and is more in line with why you took the course.